Hello, welcome back. Today I am joined by Osteopath Jamie Thompson. So, Jamie, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Andy, for the invitation. Look forward to discussing a few things.
Indeed, indeed. So, where are you talking from today?
Currently at my home down in Godalming in Surrey, dodging the rain, the lovely summer that we've had so far here in England. So yeah, a nice Friday. I'm actually going to a wedding this afternoon, so a nice Friday morning, discussing things with you, and then going down to celebrate some cousin's wedding.
Oh, great. Where's that happening?
Woking, so not actually too far from us here, which is helpful.
Very good, very good. Well, yeah, I won't keep you for ages then, so you can go and make yourself look sharp for the wedding.
Thank you.
So, whereabouts are you from originally?
So originally born and raised up in Shrewsbury. So family still up there and just south of the Wirral. And my immediate family, mum and dad, moved further south towards Brighton when I was about 8 years old. And they've stayed south ever since. So I went to school through, in Sussex, went off to university, then moved back home after university, and then up into London where I met my wife, and we lived in Clapham for a bit, and then, as I said, moved down to Godalming now. So a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, Clapham. Is that what's the big nightclub there? Infernos.
I know, yeah, some memorable nights in there that perhaps we shouldn't be discussing on a podcast.
I would have thought so. Yeah, whenever you've got carpet in a club, it's not great, is it?
The worst, the sticky carpet, and this just holds the smell, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. No,
not
no.
good.
Not good, but also great. You know what I mean? It's one of those.
It's the place to be, isn't it, on a Saturday after whatever on a Saturday, bit of sport and things, great social spot.
Yeah. So what was your degree in then?
So my degree was in osteopathy, osteopathic medicine. So I studied at Oxford Brookes. Unfortunately, it's closed. The course has stopped or been closed down since I left, which is a real shame, because Oxford Brookes, what at the time was the only, what I describe as mainstream university to study osteopathy. The other osteopathy colleges or institutes were very much on their own, whereas at Oxford Brookes, you had the whole student life, if you will. So you had the regular halls, living with students that were studying other things, the sport, which for me was important. And I didn't just want to go to a closed off institute of osteopathy. That was my thought process. That wouldn't have worked for me and what I was about. So yeah, Oxford Brookes was an awesome place to be for 4 years.
And so what made you go for osteopathy?
Great question. So I was really lucky to be at a school where we had a careers officer involved, and she was really helpful to me, actually. And we'd have meetings from about age 16, I think it was, sort of just preempting what A levels we were going to choose, potentially lining up a career. And I love my sport, play every sport under the sun, and wanted to go into something sport orientated, and flirted with the idea of going into the physio world. And then she said, "Oh, why don't you look at the world of osteopathy?" So, funny enough, I said, "Well, my godfather's an osteopath up in Liverpool." So I got on the phone to him, flew up to Liverpool and spent a week with him, and thought, I can get on board with this. This is really cool. It's great. I spent a bit of time in a physio clinic up there as well, sort of got the balance and understood what they were all about. And yeah, went and then looked around some universities and finally, thought, osteopathy is the route to go down. So it was, a combination of things, I think.
Yeah. And how would you describe the differences if you considered physio and osteopathy? What like the different fundamentals?
I think it's a bit of a continuum. So at one end you have physio, and at the other end you have chiropractic care. The osteopathy floats somewhere in the middle. Osteopathy classically, way back, has slightly different beliefs and different fundamental basics that is different to physio and chiro. But I think modern day medicine, modern day practice has almost moved everything under the same umbrella. We'll come on to that in a minute, but I went on to do a master's in sports medicine, and that I think has moved me more to the physio world, if you will, which or the way of practicing. There's definitely a crossover. I think osteopathy, you have perhaps more hands-on care. I think that's perhaps the difference, certainly in the clinic that I'm at now. I think I think that's probably where the difference lies. But I think in modern day medicine is they're both so aligned, and that's why they work pretty well together. But roll back 50, 100, 200 years, then that's where they would have been slightly different.
Yeah. And then when you were taking that course, then did you have like a career pathway or vision as to what you wanted to end up doing?
Always said I wanted to work in sport. That was always my go-to. Speaking to tutors, and they were like, "Oh, it's hard. You might not. You've got to be a bit broader, like open up your horizons, be perhaps a bit more broad-minded." And I just thought, I'm going to try and pursue that as much as I possibly could. And at that point, when I was studying, there weren't many osteos in sport. It was still an evolving practice, and sort of perhaps unrecognized in sporting teams. But certainly I feel I'm in it at the right time from a sporting perspective, because it is growing. A lot of teams, particularly football teams, have osteos involved, which is great. And certainly there's more opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, two people we've had previously that I've chatted to is Carl Todd, who's got a great reputation and works with the England team and has got his own clinics as well, and then Chris Myers, who's got a physio background as well as osteopathy.
Yeah,
and it certainly does seem to be. It's like from my side, there's not as many osteopaths as there are physios. But so when you were at the university, then how did it work in terms of placements and just in terms of you getting experience?
So at university, we had a clinic on site, which was for the general public. They came, they actually paid to see us as students, a reduced fee, I may add, and we were sort of overseen by a tutor, an experienced tutor, who would dip in and out of the room and make sure everything was going well and we were doing the right thing. So that was a really good place to learn, and I think that there's no better way to learn than actually seeing real life patients, real life injuries. It's certainly the first couple of years at university, you don't see patients like that. You're just working on your classmates and your family and your friends, trying to get an understanding of the body. But third and fourth year, it was very clinical based, and I think that's where I learned the most. And yeah, you actually see real injury, and that's super important before you go out into the real world.
And then so when you have graduated, how was the transition?
So the minute you finish your exams, you can apply to, once you get your results and you get your piece of paper, you apply to the GOSC, the General Osteopathic Council, and you're registered. You're on the register, so you can practice. You just say, you can literally say, I'm an osteopath, and see as many people as you'd like. So there's no further education at that point. So I moved back home to Sussex, to my family home, and was invited to work at a couple of clinics, one in Brighton and one just outside of Chichester. So that's how I split my work week. And I enjoyed it. It was quite samey in a sense of the clinic and sort of the injuries that I saw, and that's why I kept in the back of my mind, I want to go into sport again, and see what I could do in the world of sport. And yeah, from that moment, I thought, I can't see myself being in a clinic all day, every day. So that's where I reached out, and fortunately had an opportunity to go into the world of sport in cricket to start with.
So how did that opportunity happen then?
So prior to going to university, I was trying to play proper cricket, professional cricket. That was my ambition at that point in time. I was playing a lot of second 11 cricket, and that was my dream. And I had lots of opportunities to play. went to university and was on the MCC University's cricket programme, the 6 Centres of Excellence in the UK. So I got a place on one of those, which was great because it meant I could train full time at cricket, have access to brilliant facilities, brilliant coaches, but also was studying and in full time education. So it was a really good balance for me. And I, unfortunately, in my second year, I think it was, had some stress fractures in my lower back, which isn't the most uncommon thing in young fast bowlers, unfortunately. And so I was put on a rehab plan, and luckily studying at the same time, and something quite helpful for me in terms of understanding what injury I was experiencing. So I went through all the protocol, got back fit, played again, and was fortunate enough to play a bit of first class cricket and many more second team games, I was saying, and thought, yeah, we're back on track again. Following season, unfortunately, stress fractures reappeared. So end of the world, what am I going to do? And luckily at that point was put in touch with somebody who's still playing the games, a player called Steve Kirby, who's coming to the end of his career at Somerset. He was transitioning to become a coach, and he was doing his level 4 coaching badge and had to have a bit of a case study. And I got on with him really well. Great character. He's full of life, bit of a lunatic, but he was great fun to be around. And so I said, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to work with you. So I travelled down to Somerset to Taunton to work with him and try and get me back on track again. And so we did that. Unfortunately, it didn't work out in terms of trying to sign somewhere. It's the way it goes in sport. And so that's when I then went back to Sussex and worked in the clinics. But a year later, I got a phone call from him and said, mate, I'm taking up the head coach role of the MCC Young Cricketer programme at Lords. And I've just been informed that the physio that they've had has left. Would you want to come on board? I said, absolutely. He knew how much I loved cricket, working at Lords, the place in world cricket. Couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. So travelled up to Lords, had an interview with the medical staff up there and with Steve, and was offered the role. And it was amazing. I can't be more grateful to him in terms of the opportunity and the 4 years or 3.5 years that I spent with him at the YCs, and amazing memories.
And so how did that work then? How often were you at Lords?
So it was initially, so there was an osteopath at Lords prior to my arrival, Keith Gladstone, who has been great in terms of my career in sport as well and giving me opportunity, which we'll come on to, no doubt. So initially it was covering matches, it was covering the second 11 games, so traveling all over the country, covering major match days at Lords, which was amazing. Was fortunate enough to be at Lords during the World Cup that England won, and so my timing was perfect to enjoy some amazing moments. An Ashes series, so it was a bit of clinical role, diagnostics, injury management, injury prevention with the S&C coaches, and then pitch side trauma care and management.
Yeah, I mean that must have been like for you as a cricket fan, and then you kind of starting your own clinical journey as well. That must have been pretty much like a dream job.
Oh, amazing. I'd only ever been, it sounds weird, but as a big cricket fan, I'd only ever been to Lords once before. So I was 25 when that opportunity presented itself. So I think I'd only been to Lords when I was about 11 or 12, and that memory will stick with me in terms of that first time you see the grass at Lords. My mum always winds me up now. She says, the first moment you saw the grass, you're like, Mum, look at the grass, like unbelievable. And then, working in to Lords to work, it's sort of got a special aura about it. I don't know if you've been to Lords yourself, but it's sort of got this weird feeling, which is very unique in world sport. The physio room, the clinical room is in the pavilion. So walking into the pavilion as your place of work is quite unique.
Yeah. So you were there for 4 years?
Yeah, just shy of 4 years, 3.5 years. And then COVID struck and that really changed things. So unfortunately, the MCC YC program was stopped, that the funding was pulled as businesses were trying to work out how on earth they were going to sustain themselves through that period of time. So I had a very difficult phone call and was told that unfortunately my role was no longer. And at the time, it's pretty tough to hear. The world is going into this crazy phase. You're told you're not going to have a job for the summer, so that was in March time. And from March through to September, as you can imagine, my diary was pretty cricket dominant. So I'm thinking, oh, goodness me, what am I going to do here? So that came to quite an abrupt end. That's the way it goes. But from that, I was then fortunate that other opportunities opened. And yeah, luckily I'm still in one of those opportunities at Isokinetic.
Right. Yeah. Well, Isokinetic, that's another big institution. And so, what was the transition to that role?
So the doctor involved at Lords is a chap called Dr. Phil Batty, who I know you've had on your podcast before, and I got on well with Phil. At Lords, we seemed to click from the off, which was great. And so I contacted him actually and said, look, as you know, the YCs is being stopped. My opportunity there has come to an end. What are your thoughts? Is there other areas that other clinics, other sporting teams that are looking for osteopaths? At the time was probably a silly thing to ask because nobody was, because it was a pandemic. But he came back and said, actually, we need another osteopath at the Isokinetic in London, and would I be interested? So absolutely, everyone. Being in the world of sports medicine, I knew Isokinetic. I'd been there a number of times with some of our players to see Phil at Isokinetic, so I knew where it was. I knew how amazing the facility was there. So again, I went up and met with the director there, a chap called Mike Davison, who I think you know as well. Again, got on with him really well, and they offered me the opportunity. And about 6 weeks, I think, or so later, when they reopened properly, I started and went through the onboarding, and still am there today.
So when you go into somewhere like Isokinetic, I was down at the conference recently, which is, they've got amazing history. That schedule just stresses me out looking at it. So I don't know how Mike manages to pull it all together. But when you go into somewhere like that, do they talk to you about like the culture, like the drivers, what their mission is and things? That for us, when we're interviewing people or chatting to them, that's a big part of what we're looking for. So what's it like going into a place like Isokinetic?
Massively so. That is they're non-negotiable. You buy into their culture, and it's brilliant. It's an Italian-owned company. So there's 8 centres across Italy, and we're in London. And you go to Bologna to the headquarters. You meet the family. So it's the Della Villa family that own the clinic, and you spend time with them. They look at you from a character perspective. They take you for some dinner and try and invite you into their family, really, which is amazing. And you have to buy into that, of course. There's a titolari course, which is basically 100 questions, which talks about the Isokinetic way, the 4 pillars that they have, and it is a big important factor to work in there.
And then, so from your perspective, then when you're speaking to any organisation, is like how much does that get you on board, or like are you looking for something to align? Have you got your own values that you're looking to do, or?
Definitely. I think fundamentally in sports medicine, we deal with human beings, right? So yes, there's an injury, but I think at times all the time, you have to strip that injury away and actually deal with the person in front of you. And therefore their culture of that and how they create an atmosphere, how they drive excellence for every individual is hugely important. And yes, there's a set protocol for ACL rehabilitation, Achilles rupture, whatever, that you have to follow, and you have to go through certain markers and jump through certain hoops. But at the end of the day, they're a human being, whether they're an international footballer or a 60-year-old who wants to play with their grandchild. They are just humans, and that's important, and they make that very clear. And I think you have to have that connection with the patient from the off, otherwise they're not going to buy into you. You're going to find it difficult to work with them. So yeah, I think that is hugely important.
I think I'm just using this for market research now, but yeah, bear with me on it. So it's like, so in terms of that culture piece, is that like continually like delved into with their, like, in whether it's in a one-to-ones or quarterly meetings or whatever?
Absolutely. So we have medical meetings. So the osteopaths sit with the doctors in Isokinetic. So we have medical meetings quarterly in Italy, which is nice. We go for long weekends and stay in some lovely places. And absolutely. So things are discussed. Yes, it's more of a medical meeting, but it always comes back to the culture and the clinical atmosphere. How can they improve it in each centre? Learn from each other, and that's a really great thing. And once a year, there's a whole clinical meeting, whole company meeting. So everybody from reception staff to maintenance staff to physios, doctors, osteos go over to Italy, and we have a huge company meeting, and that is very much about the culture and coming all together. Speaking about what institute we work for, how we should go about it, developments, and so on. So it is massive.
No, it sounds great. Sounds really good. And then from the conference itself, do you have any involvement with that? I met Andrea prior to so we, like, because you've got one of our ultrasound machines there that Chris and the guys use. So like for the conference perspective, how involved did the clinical team get in that?
They're pretty involved. So most of the physios will present a case and like a poster presentation and discussions about how they perhaps would go about it differently if they saw this patient again, learning points and so on, which is really important. That's how we all learn. The doctors will all present on an injury or an area of the body, whatever it may be, on the main stage, which I'm sure you saw with Chris and Jesus and Matt. So that's that's more of a medical sort of lecturing type thing that the doctors do.
Yeah, and what's your remit within your role at Isokinetic?
So my role at Isokinetic is very much hands-on. So how we work at Isokinetic, it's a doctor-led clinic. So patients will arrive. They will have to see the doctor to come into care, or most do. That some bypass that and just come directly just osteopathy. But if they want to come in and do physiotherapy, they have to see the doc. So they will have their consultation, scans will be ordered, or an ultrasound done, or whatever that may be, and then they're in care. So a pathway is created for them. So that may be 10 sessions with the osteo, 30 sessions with the physio, of which 5 will be hydrotherapy, 15 in the gym, and then 10 in the green room, or whatever it may be, which is sort of, the green room is an area where it's sort of all singing, all dancing in terms of the room, lots of video analysis, force plates and so on, which give more of an idea of where that athlete is at before they go back onto the field. So it's a whole journey that patient will go on, and they'll check in regularly with the doctor, just tweak slightly the plan, maybe add another physio session or take one away if they're getting a bit sore, and so on. So it's a unique clinic in that sense.
And then again, from your perspective, you've gone from working in Lords, which was like your kind of dream job there, but now you're on in a prominent location on Harley Street. How was that change for you, and like what was it like working? I mean, I always think there's a massive buzz anywhere in a lot of places in London, but particularly Harley Street.
Harley Street's very unique in terms of what's on offer on Harley Street from a medical perspective, from cosmetic to surgical to sports medicine. So our patient load there is mostly athletic patients as a sports medicine clinic. We perhaps see maybe 5% are elite athletes. 50% are semi-pro to amateur, and the rest are just relatively active. We get the odd patient that's pretty sedentary or elderly, which tests us in that environment. But it's fundamentally the patients there want to get back to physical activity, and that's really important in a sports medicine clinic. So they know that they're coming in to try and get back to some kind of sport, and we know that, and we know what their targets are, their aspirations are, that we can work towards. So it's a nice patient there.
And then I know you've done work in football and so on. So how do you, in terms of you've got your work at Isokinetic, how does that fit in with other things that you're looking to do or are doing?
So when I first joined Isokinetic, I was doing a little bit of work at Tottenham Hotspur with Keith Gladstone, who is still there as an osteopath. So initially it was sort of a cover period while he was away, actually at the Rugby World Cup with England. So I did a block for about 3 months, and got on really well with the staff and the coaching staff, the players. So essentially it evolved to be a bit of a job share, if you will, sort of a bit more of a cover role for when he was away with other bits and pieces. So I really enjoyed that. It was amazing, great environment. I don't know if you've ever been to the training ground at Tottenham Hotspur, but it's unbelievable. You could have a holiday there for a week and not get bored. And so it was great. It was amazing, amazing medical staff. And great environment to be a part of. So I was there sort of maybe one or 2 days a week alongside Isokinetic, whilst growing my own clinical practice back down in Sussex. And then as Keith has stepped back from other roles, he's done more at Tottenham, so I've done much less. So my week has evolved to more Isokinetic and more of my own clinical practice back in Sussex.
Yeah, I've not been to Tottenham's training ground. My colleagues have, and I need to change that, because it's I've heard amazing things. I've not been to the stadium either, which I've heard is also incredible. So it's it does look really good.
No, it's amazing. It really was great. Really enjoyed my time there, and was welcomed on arrival really nicely. It was great, and again, talking about the culture there at the time was amazing. The manager was Pochettino, and I think most people in sport know that that's what he's about. He creates this culture, and we're probably about to see that at Chelsea now in terms of a huge cultural change. And it was very much a family atmosphere. Players would sit down for breakfast and lunch together. There was no phones allowed in public areas, had to interact with each other. And I think, going back to that cultural discussion we just had, I was really amazed by that. Having come from cricket, where you'd walk into a changing room, and it's slightly different at cricket because it's long days. The players, if you're a bowler and it's a batting day, phones are around at times, and it's rain delays and so on. But from his culture at Spurs, it was amazing to watch it or be a part of. It was brilliant.
And just like in that football team, I can imagine it's slightly different to when you're going into like an Isokinetic, where it's quite a sort of fixed environment. But how, apart from like the things that you mentioned there, for having no phones and interacting with people, is there any other way that that's communicated? Like, do you get given a talk on, this is what we expect, this is what accepted, that isn't what expected?
Yeah, I guess so. Actually, one of the lead physios there, a chap called Stuart Campbell, sort of sat me down and said, "This is what's expected. This is how it works. Just to warn you, the players on arrival every morning that you're in, they'll come through the medical room and they'll shake all of our hands. So just to expect that, because that's obviously quite unique." And then he was saying, when you're treating players, if some of them might get their phone out, and don't be concerned if a player like comes and says, "Get your phone away," or put your whatever. That's just how it sort of, you have leaders in dressing rooms, right, that run a culture, and so that would happen all the time. So it was a little bit of learn on the job and sort of follow suit and try and stay in line, but a bit of sort of, this is what to expect, and this is how we need you to go about what we want you to do.
No, it's really interesting. It is really interesting, because I think a lot of the time footballers get a bit of a bad rap, or sports people, particularly footballers, because they get paid so much. But the ones that I've met there, like they're really sharp, very driven, very smart. But they kind of get tagged with being, oh yeah, they're just uneducated things, whereas like that's just a mass generalization and unfair.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's it's not the players' fault that they're earning that much money. That's just how the sport has gone, and sponsorship and etc. So yes, players now are demanding, and players hold a lot of power. But again, they are still just human beings, right? And when I'm a big football fan, I'm a big Everton fan with my family coming from the Wirral. And so when I went into that dressing room or into the medical room, I was like first day, I was sort of a bit like eyes wide open. Goodness me, there's X player, Y player, thinking, oh, this is amazing. But you strip that back, they're just human beings again. They've got life issues. They're not sleeping because they've got a 2-week-old baby at home. They've got family issues. They've got whatever pressures of contracts, and it's you're right. They are given a rough ride at times, and they are just human beings. I think that's an important thing to keep going back to.
Yeah, no, again, I think it's really. I'm an Everton fan as well, by the way. So
Are you really?
I'm an Everton fan, yeah. So Joe Hinnigan, who's been on physio at Everton, and it's like Everton have had their culture and performance has been, it's been in the spotlight for a few years now, hasn't it? Because it's not been great. But then even like speaking with Joe and some other people who've been in the club, it's like I've asked that question. Oh yeah, what's it like when you see, you like for me, it's really exciting Harry Kane or whatever, and it's like they're normal people and they're doing the best they can in that particular circumstance. And it's I think it's some say everyone just assumes, they're just what are they doing? They're getting £1 million a year or whatever. Whereas like that's even like I'll be like to you, oh God, what's it like seeing Harry Kane every day? And like to you, that's just the norm, or to him, he's just a person, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. You're quite right. And yeah, the media at times is amazing, but also at times is pretty horrific to these people. And as players, they know that, they get on with it. That's just how it is. They've been brought up that way and brought up with how to manage media, manage reporters and people that are trying to meddle with them. And I think, that's something that is, if they have to have their wits about them, absolutely. But fundamentally, they just want to come in, train, eat their food and go back to their family. Most of them are pretty easygoing and want to live a pretty quiet life on a golf course, perhaps somewhere in the afternoon.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, if you've got any influence over Harry Kane, Everton need a striker. So if we could make that move happen,
that would be amazing, wouldn't it? I'm not sure there's the finances available for that. But jeepers, it's going to be an interesting season ahead. I actually think with Dyche in charge, we've got a chance of being slightly better than we have over the last few years. I think we might just about finish 14th or something.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really interesting because it's like with these new teams, and it's like you see the teams that have come into the Premier League, like Brentford, all of a sudden they're just established.
It's amazing.
Really good, like Bournemouth, Brighton, and then it's like now Luton are there, and it's like God, you see some of the teams. Like I think the first game of the Championship is Sheffield Wednesday v Southampton, and it's like historically two massive teams.
It's amazing. It's tonight, isn't it? The season starts tonight. It's amazing how quick that's come around. August, it seems so early. But you're right. It is crazy how it is changing. And we might see Wrexham in the Premier League at some point with their crazy journey that they're going on, which is great fun to watch from afar. There's this new documentary out, isn't there? I think I need to try and get hold of that and watch that. It'll be quite fun to watch.
No, it is. No, it is. I think it is really interesting. And then there's all the Saudi Arabian stuff. Like when you're in the teams, then do you hear much? Not that I'm asking you to share the gossip of what may happen, but is it talked about in terms of transfers or the players have been touted to go to Saudi for X amount or anything?
I think the players discuss it, and when I was in Spurs, when I was doing that a few years ago, it was very, you'd hear conversations going on. Of course, there'd be Sky Sports on in the physio room, and it would be talking about X, Y, and Z player moving, and they'd be speculating about it. So yeah, I think it is. Never when I was there was I, or a player would say to me, "Oh, I'm going to move here or there, or that, or one of the other members of the squad is going to go here or there." That doesn't happen. But certainly players of other teams, they love to gossip about, and I think that's normal, right? It's yeah.
Yeah.
The Saudi thing will be interesting. But at Isokinetic, we have during our summertime, in their summertime, it's 50 odd degrees. So we have quite a few patients that come from Saudi and Qatar and Dubai that come over to London, and we do some work with them for 6 to 8 weeks while they're here. And I've got a patient at the moment who's a huge football fan in Saudi, so he's buzzing. He's like, we're going to be the 3rd biggest league in the world within 5 years. We'll never compete with the Premier League or La Liga because of Madrid and Barca, but watch this space. We will be the 3rd best league. We're going to be better than Germany and France and Italy. And so he's bang on it. He's told me I need to support his team, Al Hilal. So he's like, I'm going to get you a shirt. So it's yeah. So we'll see what happens over the next few years there. But it's a bit. I was saying to him, from my perspective, I don't know if I can get on board with the money that's being thrown around there at the moment. It is fairly crazy. The offer that Mbappe's just received is pretty out there. I think that's a little bit ridiculous, but I guess if you want to make something good initially, you have to chuck a bit of money at it, and I think that's probably their thought process. But we'll see if that's got longevity or not. It'll be interesting.
People have been saying the money's ridiculous for the last 20 years, haven't they? But like, I remember Roy Keane getting his 50 grand a week or whatever, like over 20 years ago. And like, it is absolutely crazy, isn't it? And you sort of see both sides of like the Jordan Henderson one. Oh yeah, he shouldn't have done that. But it's like, well, he's done an amazing job for Liverpool. It's like, it's a bit harsh, I think, to say he's going to have his legacy tainted.
No, I agree with you totally. As hard as that is for me to say as well, and you'd say as Everton fans, he's not. I'm not his biggest fan, but yeah, you can't begrudge that, can you? You get offered that, you go there for 2 years, set up his family and future generations for life, and yeah, fair enough. It's one of those that you can't begrudge, absolutely. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure we'll see some higher profile players that are in their 20s that are going there to play, and everyone will be like, oh, it's just money. But it will be interesting to see whether that does give players a springboard to further things. I don't know. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. No, it will be really interesting. So you mentioned earlier on about the non-clinical skills, and like, what would you say are the core ones to be a good clinician?
Oh, good question. I think empathy for one. You've got to understand your patients and empathize with them, as sometimes as difficult as that is. You do have to buy into what they're saying to you. I think you have to be quite open as a practitioner. I think gone are the days of a set protocol. This is how we rehab a hamstring or whatever. I think you have to be a lot more open to the journey that patient's on, and I think that sports medicine is always evolving, so it's hugely important to have eyes open and discussion points with everybody, and not think that you know everything. I think and to be fair, I think most people in sports medicine aren't like that anymore, but I think at times there's egos that get involved, aren't there? And I know this, and this is how we're going to do it. But actually, I don't think you ever stop learning, and everyone will say that to you, I'm sure. But you've got to have eyes open all the time and be willing to soak up new information and new studies and new ways of doing things, and put your patient first rather than you first. I think is important.
And how have you seen change in patients' expectations in terms of the treatment that they receive? How has that changed over the last few years?
I don't know if there's been a change as such from expectations. I think every patient comes in, and the first thing I say to all of my patients is, what are you expecting from me, from us, just so we know what we are trying to work towards. And at times we can go back to that and say, okay, point 1 we've completed, you can now walk for 10 minutes or whatever. And so therefore there's good markers along the way, good targets to hit. So that's important. But ultimately, every patient expects to get better and back to what they were doing prior to injury, which is fair enough. And in the most part, you'd hope that happens. Unfortunately, at times you have to have honest conversations with people and say, unfortunately, this is going to be you now for life. You're going to have to manage this condition or manage this injury with prehab, rehab, ongoing stuff, whatever it may be. But yeah, I don't think that will ever change. Every patient just wants to revert back to what they were doing before.
Yeah, one of the things that we've found with the business that we're in, like with the NHS, finding it quite difficult, is that private clinics, particularly the patient, they're going to privately more, but also they may have more of an expectation on objectivity or outputs or different things as technology is improving.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything like that where they are more demanding of what resource you've got or equipment or anything like that?
Yeah, I think when patients go into a gym, I take Isokinetic for example. There's all the equipment in there, and patients at times will say to me, because I'm not in the gym, they'll come up and say, "Oh, there's a patient with like this thing on their leg that was pulsing, and I'd like to have a go on that." And I'm like, but you don't need to have a go on that because you've got, like, it was the complex machine, right? So I'm like, you've got enough muscle control, muscle strength to not do that. So you're a bit ahead of that. Oh, but it looks like it would be helpful. And it's sort of like managing all these different things around the clinic and saying, it's not playground. Like you're here for rehab, and the physio, doc, osteo, whatever will do what they think is best for you, rather than it being, yeah, try that today and have a go on that, as you're going to get injured. Isokinetic is very good at testing patients throughout with the Isokinetic machine, for example, or muscle power testing tools, etc. So they are very good at, or we are very good at ensuring patients can see improvement and change and hitting markers and saying, actually, we've still got 5 degrees to go in terms of your knee extension, and that's what we've got to work on for the next 2 weeks. In 2 weeks we retest and or remeasure, and you see that 5% or 5 degrees back again, and you're thinking, yeah, great. And so then they can transition on to the next thing. So it is important. That's a really good point, and I think patients really need to see that now.
Yeah, for your own development then, are there any like non-clinical self-development books that you're into? I'm a massive fan of my own personal development of whatever these books may be, and there's obviously thousands of them. Are there any particular ones that you're into, or are you into that sort of thing?
I've just finished a master's, like literally just handed in my dissertation 2 weeks ago, which was a big relief. And so throughout that, yeah, you're developing as a practitioner, constantly learning, constantly having discussions with tutors, specialists in whatever part of the body that we're discussing on any given week. And so, yeah, throughout that, I've developed as a practitioner, absolutely. From a outside of a clinical perspective, there are so many books now, aren't there? It's this massive movement of self-development and how to improve as an individual. I haven't quite got on board with that. I haven't quite got into books yet of that, but I'm not against it. I'm sure I will at some point. Got to find the time now. I'm out of the masters and not reading journals and research papers to actually take a time to do that. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, well, no, I can see you've got Ant Middleton, Andy McNabb. So you've got some of the military. Is that the fictional stuff, or is Ant Middleton's one of his? That looks like one of his motivational ones, is it?
It is one of the motivational ones. You're quite right. I'm a big fan of those military books and the discipline and making self improvement. So I'm a big fan of those books. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've not done any of Ant Middleton's actually, but he's done amazingly well, hasn't he? He's really become one of the leaders in that movement.
I think he's a bit Marmite, isn't he, as a character? I think and so you either like him or loathe him, but I think he's a good chap. He's pretty black and white, which I quite like. He says it how it is. You watch some of those SAS programs that he did, and yeah, he's pretty brutal, but I think he's clearly had an amazing career in the military, and fair play to him.
And how was the Masters?
Masters was brilliant. 5 years it took me, so I did it distant learning part-time at UCL in sports medicine. was great. I'm glad to see the back of it, I won't lie. A lot's gone on in the 5 years that I started. We've had a pandemic, marriage, house move, child. So there's a lot of things that have been thrown into the equation to get home from. And I said, I've done it part-time distance learning, so I've worked full-time around it. So particularly the last sort of 6 months with a baby involved has been tricky to get home and sort of read journals just before I go to bed whilst feeding her, and it's it has been a journey, but one I've really enjoyed, and I'm glad I did it. And it's been great. Masters are great in terms of opening doors to different practitioners, discussion points, speaking with consultants and so on. So that's what I wanted to get from it as well, which is definitely has given me that.
Great. And what do you see as the plan for you over the next 5-10 years or so?
I'd like to, from a personal perspective, I'd like to grow my own private clinical practice, which I have back in Sussex. I'd like to expand that. So that's the first thing. Now I'm out of the masters, that I've got a bit more time to try and work out how to do that. So that'll be fun to definitely to do, and get another couple of osteos or physios or whatever involved would definitely be the plan of action. Love to go back into a team sport environment at some point. I've always said that, and I missed the dressing room, missed the treatment room where you got players and different discussions going on, and the fun that goes with that. So yeah, absolutely would like to, if there was an opportunity that presented itself, I definitely would be keen to discuss what that would look like. So we'll see how that evolves over the next few years.
Great. And then last question, what would your advice be for people that are interested in getting into, whether it's osteopathy or anything within rehabilitation, sports medicine? What would you say to them?
I think most clinics are really good at inviting people in to come and shadow and chat and watch how things work, how patients go through journeys. I did that with my godfather up in Liverpool and another few physio clinics, and that was really helpful, because then you know exactly what you're going into. You can actually see it in real life, almost like a mini internship for a week or so. So I think that's hugely important, and speak to people. I think I was really fortunate with people that I knew already in the world of sports medicine to reach out and speak, and people want to help. You know, that's a really great thing, and people are willing to speak to you and say, there's an opportunity here, or I can introduce you to so and so. So don't be afraid to ask and have a conversation. It's exactly what I did. Rewind just a few minutes ago when I reached out to Dr. Phil Batty, and said, what, I'm a bit stuck here. Rolling cricket's stopped, finished. What shall I do? And straight away he offered me a role. So I think that was fortunate, very lucky timing. But I think that's a really important thing, is speak to people, and people are always going to be willing to help.
Brilliant. No, sounds good. Well, let's keep me posted when you're in the Northwest. If you fancy an Everton game, we can maybe get down there. We should get in early on before the stress really kicks in.
Absolutely. I'm not sure how many days I can do again at Goodison Park, where I don't really want to watch. But yeah, definitely this year, potentially the last year at Goodison, isn't it? It depends how the new stadium goes. So definitely be venturing up a few times to come and watch, and try and get to a few away games down. We get to quite a few away games down here actually, which is great, and with family. So yeah, we'll definitely hook up before a game for sure.
Sounds good. Brilliant. All right. Look, Jamie, really appreciate it. Have a great time at the wedding, and thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate it. All the best.
Cheers.